Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another segment of The Last Word. I'm Dan Roberts, the publisher of the Vegas Voice, and our goal is to introduce you to all the candidates who are running for elected office. We're very lucky and fortunate to have today Gerard Ramalho, who is running for the Nevada Secretary of State position. Gerard, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor, and I believe you guys do a great service informing the community.
Thank you for those very kind words. I would assume most seniors recognize Gerard more than anybody else because of his former career in TV. How did you go from there to decide to run for Secretary of State?
Well, thank you so much. And I hope people recognize me. That would be a good thing in my favor. I was at Channel 3, a local station here, for 21 years. And enjoyed it. Spent 30 years in the broadcast industry, and when my time at Channel 3 ran out, I had opportunities to go to other stations, but frankly, I had a passion to do something else. And in terms of TV and journalism, the industry has changed a lot to where I didn't necessarily identify with where it was headed, but I still wanted to serve my community.
Right.
When people ask me, why run for that's crazy.
Well, that's my next question. I mean, you lived it on the other side.
Sure.
You got to interview politicians, speak to them, see what's going on. And while you probably couldn't do it in public, you knew which guys were good and which guys were, oh my God, they're horrible. Yeah. And with all the negativity going on, and I can tell you were extremely well respected at Channel 3.
Thank you very much.
Why would you then go from that to running for public office?
Well, I think there's a need for strong leadership. And, I love my community. I love this state. And I had the opportunity, and I was approached by a couple people who said, why don't you jump in and run for office? I looked at a few different positions. The Secretary of State's office is extremely important because you're the chief elections officer, especially at this day and age. It's so critical. It was a termed out office. The current office holder, Barbara Skavsky, is termed out. So it was an open seat. And I said to myself, we need someone strong who can fill that position, who's going to be a rational, common sense voice and reflect the values of the community that I live in. And so I decided, I'm going to jump in. I don't know a ton about politics other than I've interviewed, thousands of them probably.
Sure.
But I'm in it, and my objective is to be just honest and integrity based, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, and for Secretary of State, that's been a very now controversial position over the last couple of years because of the election. What's your take on all this? Well,
I was a reporter and an anchor during our previous election, right? And I witnessed firsthand a lot of the problems that we had. I don't think it's deniable that we're in a situation now where people in our state don't have a lot of confidence in the outcome of elections. You can say it went one way, you can say it went another way. That's neither here nor there. People don't trust the elections process.
Right.
So my goal is to restore integrity in our elections. We were just ranked 50th in the nation by the Heritage Foundation. They did a study nationwide on elections here in the country, and Nevada ranked 50th because of the measures that were introduced in our previous election because of COVID. Ballot harvesting, the universal mail ballots, part of the low ranking has to do with a lack of transparency, a lack of chain of custody. And these are all measures that give people pause. We should all feel good at the end of an election day, regardless of what party you are, right? Integrity benefits everyone,
Sure.
Democrat, Independent, Republican, whoever you are. So that's my goal, is to restore integrity. And, I can talk about the things that I'm in favor of. One of them is voter ID.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. The things that you favor, things that if people vote for you, this is what you support and this is what you believe in.
Well, I'm going to be a strong voice for implementing voter ID. I believe that we need that in Nevada. There was a poll done by the Honest Elections Project that showed 81% of Americans favor voter ID and the citizenship requirement. We want to protect those requirements that give integrity to our elections. So this is what I'm going to push for. Unfortunately, I can't just be elected and say, okay, this is how we're doing it. We need lawmakers on board, and we need to pass laws, and we need a governor who's on board with it also. So I would encourage everyone who's participating in this election, who's voting, to really look closely at the candidates. Voter ID should be one of our top priorities, and certainly it's going to be my priority.
What about, again, over the last election, because of COVID, there was a lot of voting by mail. What's your position on that? Again, as Secretary of State, you're either going to get the credit or probably get the blame.
Oh, yeah. And exactly.
Yeah.
I'm prepared for some of that. But here's the thing. I think, prior to the previous election, if you requested a mail-in ballot, absentee ballot, you could get one. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's still a great process. If you know you're going to be out of town, or you're going to, you're homebound, what have you, I have no problem with you requesting a mail-in ballot. And then you have that as an option. But to have a universal mail process, what ends up happening is some of these ballots, as we saw, got dumped in dumpsters. Some of them were left by mailboxes. Some of them went to addresses where people no longer live, or they went to commercial buildings instead of to the address of a registered voter. And all of this opens the door for nefarious action. And, we can talk about fraud. We can talk about, problems. I believe this opens the door to that. Same thing with ballot harvesting. I think it gives a benefit to one side over the other. And maybe now it's Democrats, maybe later it might be Republicans. Right. And so we don't want these things. We want what is going to restore confidence in our elections.
And, one of the things that people are telling me is, assuming you win,
sure.
Okay, and if the governor stays the way it is, you have a Republican Secretary of State, a Democratic governor, lieutenant governor, either Democrat or Republican. How does everybody get along? And do you feel you can get along if it's the opposition party?
I do. And I would approach it the same way I approached my news career, which is objectively. And I have an ability, I believe, to sit down, even with people who disagree with me, and argue strong points.
Right.
If 80% of Americans favor voter ID,
mm-hmm.
then I think, a rational governor will sit down and say, he has a strong point. Maybe there's something that we should consider there. I mean, with respect to our current governor, I mean, I interviewed him dozens of times as a commissioner and as governor, and we've always had a positive, friendly relationship. In fact, I don't think he even knew what party I belonged to mm-hmm. prior to my announcing my candidacy. So I think that even Democrats, look at me favorably. And I think right now, you can't deny that nationwide Democrats are upset. And they're paying the gas prices.
Yeah.
They're looking at the problems that we have, and looking at the inflation, and looking at the challenges in our schools and with crime. And they're recognizing that the path that we've been on has not been the best path. So hopefully, if the leadership is mixed, hopefully we'll have enough lawmakers that we can get some things passed, and there will be some reasonable leadership there as well.
And, again, for our readers, Vegas Voice, 50 and over,
sure.
What can you tell seniors when you look in the camera and say, I think you should vote for me because?
Well, I'll look in the camera.
Go ahead.
Since you're calling me to do that, I would ask for you to vote for me because we need strong leadership. We need rational, common sense values or voices who will represent the values of the community. I think we've gotten to a point where even right and wrong is being misrepresented. The far left, I'll give you an example. They recently tried to pass the Voter Rights Act. Well, to me, that's a little bit dishonest, and that's a misnomer, because no one on the right is trying to take away the rights of anyone to vote. In fact, people like myself included, I'm trying to protect the rights of voters, mm-hmm. right? And make sure that the votes count. So, I think based on the reputation that I've had here, hopefully people will recognize that I will be a voice of reason, and I will be a voice of common sense.
And I assume that, are you still in favor of early voting, the way it's done right now? Because again, our Sun City residents, they go right to their community center and they get to vote.
Yeah, and I like that. And in fact, Democrats have said that they have concerns about access to the polls and access to voters. And I want to clarify a couple of my positions on that. I think we should address those concerns also.
Right.
Maybe there's an opportunity to extend early voting period, which would allow more opportunity. We can look at adding more polling locations and more balloting locations. I think that's something that we can look at as well. I'm opposed to ballot harvesting, but let me clarify something. If you're homebound, if you're a senior, you can't make it to the polls, I think you can still designate someone to go take your ballot to the polls for you.
Right.
I do that for my own parents, both of them.
Mm-hmm.
They still want to participate. They're elderly, they're homebound, but they're still patriotic and want to participate in elections.
Sure.
So they have me down or my brother down to take their ballot to the balloting location. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's when you have a political party operative going door to door collecting ballots, which represents problems. Or you have, for example, a union representative taking 10,000 ballots from a union. The possibility for him to go through a list of ballots and say, oh, well, I don't like this guy, or this guy's too far right, or this guy's too far left. I mean, it can go either way, right?
Oh.
They could somehow lose those ballots, and there's no chain of custody requirement there. I think that's a huge problem.
And Gerard, in the minute we have left, if people want more information about you, your candidacy, they want to support you, more importantly, they want to contribute to your campaign, how do they go about doing it?
Sure. I've got a website. It's gerardfornevada.com, and for is spelled out F-O-R. You can Google me. You can get on Facebook. I'm all over social media. People can look me up very easily. Gerard for Nevada. And additionally, the Secretary of State's office has a lot of other responsibilities. I'll just tell you in a nutshell, I want to promote business. I want to get away from this concept that some businesses are essential and some are non-essential. We need to make sure that every business understands that they are essential. Promote entrepreneurship, promote businesses. When it comes to regulation, we need fair regulation, fair taxation, so that we don't become the next California or New York or Illinois, where they're overtaxed and overburdened.
And I'd like to have you back on again as we get closer to the primary. Pleasure. I thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And this is Dan Roberts for The Last Word. And remember, if you don't vote, you don't get a voice. Thank you, Gerard.
You bet.